Hello class, we're starting section 4.4 to 4.5, adding and subtracting fractions, LCD, which stands for least common denominator, and equivalent fractions. Section A, adding and subtracting like fractions. Let's consider this visually first. If you look here, this is cut into 6 parts, so our denominator will be 6. Our numerator will be the shaded part, which is 2. So this is 2/6. Now this is added to, this is cut into 6 parts, so our denominator would be 6, and our shaded part here is 1. Now when we combine these two, if you notice here, we still just have 6 parts. So our denominator still would be 6, and our numerator would be these two numerators added together. 2 plus 1 is 3, which we have 3 shaded here. So it'll be 3/6. Now, of course, as we learned in other sections, when you can simplify, you must simplify. So if you look here, that we have this broken up into 6 parts, and 3 parts are shaded. We know that that is half of that. So this will end up being 1/2. To do this numerically, we can think of it in much the same way. We have 5/12 minus 3/12. You have a common denominator 12, so you are just looking at how many 12ths you have. So now we will subtract 5 minus 3 is 2, and it's still over 12. You have 5/12 and you take 3/12 away, so you are left with what we have here, 2/12. As is always true with fractions, we now need to ask ourselves, can we simplify? When we look here at 2/12, 2 and 12 has 2 in common, so we can divide both by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So your final answer will be 1/6. Now, we scroll down here to the next page. It says in a nutshell, to add or subtract fractions with like denominators, just add or subtract the numerators. Keep the denominators the same. Remember to check that your final answer is in lowest terms, and change any improper fraction to mixed numbers. So now let's take a look at our examples here. We have number 1. We have 5/8 plus 1/8. Now we would keep our denominators the same, which is 8, and 5 plus 1 is 6. Now when we look here at 6/8, we know that they both have 2 in common, the 6 and 8. So we'll divide off 2. So now we have 6 divided by 2, which is 3, and 8 divided by 2, which is 4. So our final answer here is 3/4. Now we go to number 2. We have -4/9 minus 2/9. Now we know whenever we have the same sign and we're adding or subtracting, we carry over the sign. So it'd be negative. Now we have the same denominator, so we'll carry over the denominator, and we'll add the numerator. 4 plus 2 is 6. So now we have a -6/9. Now we know 6 and 9 both have 3 in common. The greatest common factor of 6 and 9 is 3. So we have this is equal to a negative 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. So our answer here is a -2/3. Now, we come down here to number 3. Same thing, we have 6/7 plus 3/7. Now, we will add this. Our common denominator is 7, so we bring over our 7. 6 plus 3 is 9. So our final answer here is 9/7. But let's go back here. There was something stated in the directions. It says, remember to check that your final answer is in lowest term and change any improper fraction to mixed numbers. Now we know improper fraction means that the numerator is larger than the denominator, which we have here. So we need to write this as a mixed number. So this is what we could do. We could go off to the side and divide 7 into 9, our denominator into our numerator. 7 goes into 9 once. 1 times 7 is 7, and 9 minus 7 is 2. So we have a remainder of 2. So our final answer would be the whole number, which is 1. Our denominator will remain 7, and our numerator is always the remainder. So our final answer is 1 2/7. Now, let's go over that one more time. The number that's in front of the remainder, that will be your whole number or your integer. Your denominator will remain the same, which is 7, and your numerator is the remainder, which is 2. Now we come here to number 4, negative 2 fifteenths plus 8 fifteenths. Now remember, they must have the same denominator in order for us to add them. So we will first carry over the 15. Now negative 2 plus 8, just like in any other problem, when you have different signs, you subtract and carry the sign of the larger number. We know 8 is larger than this negative 2. So negative 2 plus 8 is a positive 6. Now we can simplify that. They both have 3 in common. So we divide both by 3. And when I say in common, I'm talking about the greatest common factor. 6 and 15, greatest common factor is 3. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. 15 divided by 3 is 5. So our final answer here is 2/5. Now we look here at section B, finding equivalent fractions. It says adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators take a little more work. So first we will have to build a little background knowledge. We have equivalent fractions are fractions that look different but have the same value. For example, all of these are really 1/2. 2/4, 3/6, 4/8, and 5/10 are all 1/2, and they're all equivalent. To form a fraction equivalent to a given fraction, remember that we cannot change the value of the original fraction. Therefore, we must be careful always to multiply the fraction by a form of 1. Now, and the reason for this is we know whenever we multiply by 1, it does not change the number. Like if we have 5 times 1, we know that's 5. If we add negative 6 times 1, it's negative 6. So we know multiplying by 1 does not change the value of the number. So now we come down here to these examples. We have 3/5 is equal to a question mark over 20. So we're trying to find out what this missing number is. So this is what we would do. We would ask ourselves, 5 times what gives us 20? We know that that's 4. So we would write that as a form of 1. Now remember, except 0, any number divided by itself is 1. So that 4 would become 4/4. So this is really 3/5 times 1. So we'll say 5 times 4 is 20, and 3 times 4 is 12. And remember, whatever you multiply your denominator by, you must multiply your numerator by. Now we look here at number 2. Now if you notice here, it's a number in our denominator that's missing. So let's look at the numerators. We could say 7 times what is 21? And we know that's 3. So we'll multiply numerator by 3 and our denominator by 3. 7 times 3 is 21. 9 times 3 is 27. So that is our final answer. Now we go to section C. It says adding and subtracting unlike fractions. You must change to equivalent like fractions before you can add or subtract. It is best to change both denominators to the lowest common denominator, the smallest number divisible by both denominators. Once you identify the LCD, change both fractions to equivalent fractions with the LCD by multiplying each by a form of 1. Now, what this is basically saying is this here. It's usually better for you to find the least common denominator, meaning you find the number, like take number 1 here. We have a denominator of 10 and we have a denominator of 4. Now, we know that, first of all, we know 10 goes into 20 and 4 goes into 20. But then also, doesn't 10 go into 40 and 4 go into 40? See, there's an infinite amount of numbers that you can have for this denominator. But what the directions is telling you is try and find the lowest one. That would make your job a lot easier. So, the common denominator of 10 and 4 is actually 20. So, what we need to do is this here. We have to ask ourselves, first of all, 10 times what gives us 20? We know it's 2. So, we'll multiply the numerator and denominator of this fraction by 2. Now, we ask ourselves, 4 times what is 20? So we know 4 times 5 is 20, so we will multiply the numerator and denominator by 5. Now, we will have 3 times 2, which is 6, and 10 times 2, which is 20, plus 1 times 5 is 5, and 4 times 5 is 20. Now we know we can add them because we have the same denominator. So we know we'll bring down our 20, and we will add our numerator. 6 plus 5 is 11. So it's 11 over 20. Now we go here to number 2. The common denominator of 2 and 9, or the least common denominator of 2 and 9 is 18. So we ask ourselves, 2 times what is 18? And we know it's 9. So we'll multiply our numerator and denominator by 9. And we know 9 times 2 is 18, so we'll multiply our numerator and denominator by 2. So now, we will have 1 times 9 is 9, 2 times 9 is 18, plus 7 times 2 is 14, and 9 times 2 is 18. We have our common denominator of 18. Now we add our numerators. 9 and 14 is 23. So we have 23 over 18. Now we cannot simplify this, but we can change this to a mixed number. So we could go off here to the side and put 18 into 23. 18 goes into 23 once. And 23 minus 18 is 5. And we will have a remainder of 5. So this is also equal to 1, denominator of 18, and your numerator is 5. Now, we scroll down here to number 3. Find the common denominator of 8 and 16, or the least common denominator we know is 16. So we can set this problem up ourselves. We have negative 3/8 plus 9/16. And we know we want to multiply both of these by a number. And we would say this, the common denominator is 16. So we know we'll multiply this numerator and denominator by 2. And since this has already 16, it's the same as multiplying the numerator and denominator by 1. So now we know this is going to be negative. 8 times 2 is 16, and 3 times 2 is 6. And then 16 times 1 is 16, and 9 times 1 is 9. Negative 6 over 16 plus 9 over 16 is 3 over 16. And that is your final answer. Now we come here to number 4. The common denominator, or least common denominator of 8 and 6, we know is 24. So it'll be 5/8 minus 5/6. Now we ask ourselves, 8 times what is 24? We know it's 3. So this would be 3 over 3. And 6 times what is 24? We know it's 4. So 5 times 3 is 15. 8 times 3 is 24. Minus 5 times 4 is 20. All over 6 times 4 is 24. 15 minus 20 we know is negative 5. And that'll give us over 24. So that will be our final answer here. Now, we scroll down here to section E, comparing fractions. In order to compare fractions, determine which is larger, we need to have like fractions, fractions with the same denominator. In general, we would try to change both denominators to the lowest common denominator, then determine if the fractions are greater than, less than, or equal to. So the common denominator, 8 and 3, we know is 24. So we would ask ourselves, we would take 5/8 times, we know this would be times 3 over 3, and we'll take 2/3 times 8 over 8. 5 times 3 is 15, 8 times 3 is 24, 2 times 8 is 16, and 3 times 8 is 24. So now, this first fraction is equivalent to 15 over 24, and the second fraction is equivalent to 16 over 24. So we know the 2/3 is greater than the 5/8, so 5/8 is less than 2/3. Now remember, we had to find that common denominator, the least common denominator. So now we go here using the same method. Now the least common denominator of 3 and 12 we know is 12. So we have 2/3 times 4 over 4